Hey there, and welcome. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating journey. We're unpacking an incredibly profound ancient text called the Nivapa Sutta, straight out of the Buddhist Pali Canon. Basically, we're going to decode this brilliant, centuries-old allegory that literally speaks right to a problem you and I face every single day: the constant gravitational pull of our own desires and how they completely trap us. You know that feeling, right? Where you're caught in this endless loop of wanting something, getting it, and then still feeling totally unfulfilled? Well, this ancient roadmap actually holds the key to ultimate liberation. We're going to break this whole thing down step by step so we get a crystal clear understanding in this explainer. Let's get right into it. So think about this for a second. How do you escape a trap when the bait is exactly what you desire, right? It's tough. And that is the core dilemma our source text presents. To explain this, the text uses this really brilliant fable. It tells the story of a super clever hunter who plants a whole field of lush, vibrant green grass. But here's the catch. He doesn't plant this delicious grass out of the goodness of his heart. He's not trying to feed the local deer so they can live long, happy lives. No way. He plants it with a much darker motive. He plants it to control them. The bait is absolutely irresistible. And the hunter knows for a fact that where desire leads, distraction is sure to follow. The text actually lays out this hauntingly rhythmic sequence. The logic is flawless, kind of like falling dominoes. The deer wander into this lush field and just gorge on the grass. And because it tastes so incredibly good, they literally become intoxicated by the pleasure of it. Now, when they're intoxicated, what happens? They let their guard down, they become careless, and when they get careless, snap, the trap is sprung. Just like that, they're completely at the mercy of the hunter, who can now do whatever he wants with them. It's this vicious, inescapable cycle. Okay, moving right along to part 1, the tale of the 4 herds and how they deal with temptation. To show us exactly how this trap operates, the text outlines 4 different herds of deer. The first herd, well, they just go all in. Step 1 is pure indulgence. They eat the grass, get totally careless, and boom, they're instantly caught. Now, the second herd sees this disaster and tries step 2, extreme deprivation. They run deep into the woods and swear off the grass entirely. Basically, they starve themselves. But when the dry season hits, they grow incredibly weak. Out of sheer exhaustion and hunger, they stagger right back to the hunter's field, eat the grass, get careless, and, yep, they get caught too. The third herd thinks they're the smart ones. Step 3, they decide to hide in plain sight right on the edge of the field without actually eating the bait. Clever, right? But the hunter just casts a massive net around the whole perimeter and catches them anyway. But then we get to the fourth herd. They execute step 4. They literally go somewhere the hunter physically cannot reach. They magically vanish from his sight entirely, and finally, they escape the trap. So let's unpack that in part 2, decoding the metaphor and the Buddha's message. The Buddha doesn't just leave us with a cool little bedtime story. He actually translates this into a profoundly deep commentary on human psychology. Here's how this fable maps perfectly to our reality. We are the deer. Specifically, the text is talking about ascetics, or really any humans who are actively seeking spiritual liberation. The hunter? That represents Mara, the evil one, who basically embodies all the forces of death, distraction, and bondage in the world. And those lush crops, that irresistible grass? That represents the 5 sensual pleasures. Basically, everything we can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell that hooks our worldly desires. Now let's look at part 3, the failed escapes, and exactly why we stay trapped. You know, just knowing the trap is there isn't quite enough. We really have to look at why we fail to escape it. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast between the first 2 failed approaches. That first group represents pure hedonism. These are the folks who just blindly consume the world's sensual pleasures without a second thought, and they get caught instantly. But the second group is the absolute polar opposite. These are the extreme ascetics. The text so vividly describes them fleeing off into the forest, literally trying to survive on weeds, moss, wild grains, and whatever fruit drops to the ground. But listen, extreme deprivation just leads to extreme physical emaciation. Their bodily strength fails, their mental clarity completely collapses, and eventually, the sheer pressure of basic survival forces them right back into the sensual world. And once they're there, Mara easily snaps them up. So neither overindulgence nor extreme starvation actually works. Then we have the third herd, and honestly, this one is probably the most relatable for a modern focus learner. This group decides to stay right near the pleasures, but tries to intellectually detach themselves from it all. They think they're totally safe because they aren't directly indulging, but what actually happens? The text explains that they become completely obsessed with endless philosophical debates. They're out there arguing over whether the world is eternal or not, or if the soul and the body are the exact same thing. By getting so tangled up in all this intellectual posturing and theoretical argument, they lose their mindfulness entirely. They get completely distracted. And Mara? He just throws a giant net of intellectual delusion right over them and catches them anyway.
All right, this brings us to part 4, blinding Mara and the 9 steps to actual freedom.
So, if the first 3 approaches completely fail, what actually works? Well, the fourth herd is stepping entirely off the playing field. The source text uses this incredibly powerful phrase to describe it. It says it's about blinding Mara by destroying his vision. I mean, wow, these meditative states act as a literal invisibility cloak. By completely removing your mind from the realm of those 5 sensual pleasures, you no longer leave a single trace in the world that Mara controls. You essentially erase your footprints. Let's walk up these 9 steps together and see exactly how they did it. The journey kicks off with the first 4 jhanas, which are these deep, deep states of meditative absorption. First up, you seclude the mind from sensual desires. You experience this profound rapture and happiness, though you are actually still applying thought. Then, in the second jhana, you drop that applied thought entirely. You gain this amazing, profound inner unification and confidence. Moving up to the third jhana, that intense rapture fades out into just pure equanimity and crystal clear mindfulness. And finally, in the fourth jhana, you completely abandon both pleasure and pain, arriving at a state of pure, bright, unshakable equanimity. At this point, you are deeply, deeply hidden from the hunter. Now, let's move on and see how this builds into the formless realms. Having transcended all physical form, the mind just completely expands. Step 5 is the realization of infinite space. It's boundless. Then step 6 moves even deeper, realizing that the very consciousness aware of that space is also infinite. So, infinite consciousness. Step 7 strips even that away, arriving at this profound realm of absolute nothingness. And step 8? That brings the mind to such an incredibly subtle edge that it rests in neither perception nor non-perception. This is a hugely refined state, so far beyond any earthly bait. But, believe it or not, it's still not the absolute end. The crucial point here is this final ultimate leap. This is literally the peak of the mountain. After ascending through all those physical and formless states we just talked about, the practitioner takes the final step out of the trap altogether. Step number 9. This 9th step is defined as the cessation of perception and feeling. It is the absolute ultimate meditative state. In this profound, absolute stillness, one sees with true wisdom. And it's this very wisdom that permanently destroys the mental defilements, or taints. The craving for that bait is totally 100% severed. The individual is now completely invisible to Mara, having crossed entirely over the worldly clinging that ties us to the trap in the first place. And that is exactly how the fourth herd achieves absolute, unshakable peace. We've explored the lush, dangerous fields of the hunter. We've looked at the tragic mistakes of those first 3 herds, and we've traced the incredibly detailed map of liberation charted by the fourth herd. It is such a striking metaphor for our modern lives, isn't it? I mean, digital and material bait surrounds us 24/7. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. If the bait is everywhere, what step will you take today to step out of the hunter's sight? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, keep stepping forward.